What's up, guys? This is Words Matter. I am John. This is Brusha. This is not content. This is a conversation. This big-ass Smokey the Bear hat you got on, no. Okay.
Guys, I'm going to be honest. My hair was not good today. And I'd already worn most of my hats in the videos. And I was like, I haven't worn that one yet. And so,
Yeah.
We're making a statement today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Getting back to my Montana roots.
So many jokes that we will just leave alone.
Mm-hmm. We'll let the internet make them.
They are going to. Your head is large. Okay.
I know.
I'm just fucking with you. Okay. Today's topic, we're going to do something a little different. I'm always saying lead with vulnerability. This is something that I say a lot. And so today I decided that we would lead with vulnerability. She is fucking already loving this. She's loving where this episode's going because she's going to have a field day. I am going to lead with vulnerability and kind of I don't want to say attack myself, but put myself out there a little bit of something I have an issue with. Let's just say I'm on a journey, right? Here's the deal, guys. When I talk to somebody, I have a conversation and I'm saying whatever it is I'm saying, I have an unwritten expectation that's out there. We didn't discuss it, but I am expecting you to agree with me because why would you not?
Or a certain response, yeah.
Or yeah, I'm looking for
reaction.
This response.
Yeah.
So I don't even know I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is I say something to you. I don't get that response that I was expecting. Again, unaware of this expectation. And so I then begin to belabor my point or try to dissect and break it down in ways like you're a third grader because you clearly could never understand, because if you did understand, you'd obviously agree. And this seems to me like it's a toxic trait. And I'm on that journey and I want to approach it. And I think I'm not the only one that does this, right?
No,
I can't be.
We all do
The reason we decided to have this episode today is because I was watching First Take and I'm a massive fan of Stephen A. Smith. And recently, I'm starting to see Stephen A. Smith a little differently. He likes to just take one little point and belabor. And I'm still a fan of Stephen A. Smith. But it does seem like we take one point and we exacerbate that point and talk about that point only when the other people that he's discussing with have conceded. They're like, yeah, good point. And moving on. And he's like, no, we're going to go back. You don't really understand what and it's like, they understood. They just don't agree with you. And so like, that's the whole conversation today is that.
Yeah. And we've had these conversations just like you and I before about this, where in the way I've described it is like a train track. Like you are like a train headed down a track, like full speed ahead, and you have a fucking point to make. And then the other person dares to come in.
How dare you?
And like pull some lever that like switches the track. And you're like, wait, no. And then
you're missing my point.
And then it's literally like swerves us back onto the original track. And I'm like, bitch, let the train go where it needs to go. Like you are not the conductor. Like it's calm down. Like, yeah, we've definitely had those conversations. The train track is always, so now when we do have these, when this happens, sometimes I'll go, it seems like you're on a train track. And I like can't, no matter what I say is not getting us off of it. And that usually at this point, you know what I mean at that point.
Yeah, it's like, and so today's episode is about kind of picking apart those emotions as to maybe why I'm doing that. Because again, this is a journey and I'm wanting to go down this journey and I'm wanting to figure it out. But it's like, what I have here, misunderstanding implies ignorance. Disagreement feels like rejection. Mm-hmm. And it does. It does. Like if you disagree, maybe I'm not good enough or maybe my perspective isn't adding to the conversation or it's not valid. And it's like, why am I searching for validation even though it's an opinion? The opinion doesn't need validation. It's an opinion. Yeah, and so like, and sorry, the rejection part of it, I think absolutely stings. But I'm also unaware of the rejection. I don't, it's not like I sit back and go, oh shit.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things are happening under the surface. Like we talk about them like you're like making conscious decisions. Like I don't think that. I think that like we are all experiencing like a fear of rejection. We desire connection and community. And so when someone disagrees with us, it almost like the immediate thought is like, does this threaten my connection with them? Does this mean like disconnect with them? And so it's like, this idea of like, well, okay, I can't not let them, but kind of like I can't let them disagree with me. They must just not understand because we're so connected. So how could we be disagreeing?
Yeah,
and it's like,
and
that's
are we
not
going to continue to be this close if we don't see eye to eye on something?
Yeah, exactly. And so
Right.
it's like, it's all happening under the surface. It's not intentional, but I think like the ultimate desire is just to stay connected. It also just challenges us to like step outside our own perspective, right? And so it's like, it's
For sure.
easy. And this, it's like, I'm for sure guilty of. I think a lot of us are, where it's like, your truth is your fucking truth, right? And so it's like, how could you not see it that way? It's the truth. And it's like,
I can't see anything with this big ass hat on your head.
you're not supposed to. Exactly.
No,
Do you know what I mean, though?
That's exactly
Yeah.
the case. That's exactly the case. And I think for me, it's like everybody knows that I do everything with like a large level of passion, or I don't do it at all. Like I just bring so much passion. So what ends up happening is when I don't get the response I was unexpectedly looking
That
for.
you were expecting, yeah.
Yeah. I was expecting it, but I was unaware, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I wasn't consciously expecting it.
Yeah.
So when I don't get it, my body goes, bitch, wait a minute. Like, and so then that passion fuels this belaboring of the point.
Yeah.
And this breaking down, which nowadays I'm starting to feel like is a bit condescending in some ways.
It can sometimes come across as like you didn't hear me or listen to me at all, right?
Right.
Because it's like you've made your point and then like my turn to respond. And then when I respond, your immediate response to that is going back to the original point. It's like, wait, you didn't even take into consideration what I just added. You just...
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's not intentional.
And it does, it's like, and we've talked about this where sometimes I say, I just need you to acknowledge you literally just heard what I said.
Totally.
You know, because it's like, and that's not even just in the context of like this pattern.
No.
But just generally when you're talking to someone and it's like they're just immediately moving on to the next thing, it's like, whoa. I just made like a whole point and I need you to acknowledge and say, yes, I hear you, or maybe ask a follow-up question.
Something.
Like lead with curiosity and
Always that.
like engage in my side of things instead of being on a mission to prove your point. Because I think that's when it becomes, it doesn't, to be honest, if you're on the other side, that's when I completely shut down. Because I'm like, we're not having a conversation anymore. This is not about connecting. This is not about sharing perspective. It's about you, and I'm saying you, but it could be me.
we're
It could
talking
be
about me.
anyone. Just trying to share something.
and
So I think, yeah.
No, I think that there's a lot of factors. First of all, I agree with everything, and thank you for that perspective. I think that going back to my line about passion, right? When I have this level of passion that's in my voice and I'm trying to, it's coming from a place of, I honestly, and this is probably an ADHD thing, which is an entirely different conversation. This could be a neurotypical with a neurodivergent conversation, which is, trust me, another episode. Excuse me. So in my heart, I actually believe, oh shit, I'm being misunderstood. Like somebody doesn't understand me, which nobody likes that feeling.
No.
And there's a portion of me that is just like, okay, whether you agree or not, I just need to make sure you understand. I need to be illustrating and articulating my point in a way that is, I always call it dummy proof. Like nobody could misconstrue this. So that is a component that comes into this. What I'm starting to recognize is that the way it's being received when I do that is very dismissive of where they want to take the conversation. It's not
Because they
acknowledging.
also want to be or they also feel misunderstood.
Correct. And
Yeah.
they also want to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Let me.
So
Yeah, let
that
me-
is when my passion, I
Yeah.
think, is the term behooves me. Like, is like, it doesn't work for me. Is that
I think it's the opposite. Behooves,
Okay.
I think, is like, it means it.
in your favor?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think we'll
Yeah,
look
we're
that
going to
up
look
later.
that one up.
Yeah.
Clearly not pros at this shit. But like, that's when I think my passion is at my detriment. Let's say that.
Yeah.
It's because I really am just trying to make sure that I'm understood. And once I get that acknowledgement that you're talking about, that I am being understood, now I can move on to the next topic or portion of the conversation. But my passion in the way I speak, in my tone, in my stance, in my micro expressions, in like my body language, everything is like, motherfucker, you understand me, right? And they're like,
Yep.
God damn, like, I need to go. Like,
Yeah, it's like, just don't even want to have this conversation
well,
anymore.
what it
And then
does
it does turn into me just being like,
fight or flight.
it's like I'm glazed over and I'm like, I don't have any Nothing I say is going to take us off this train track.
Parasympathetic doesn't
and so
exist.
we're not so we're not having a conversation. I'm just listening, and that's okay. There are times when you just like want to fucking vent or like have it be a one-sided conversation, and if you lead with that, that's okay. But if it's like we're actually discussing something, that can really make the other person feel kind of shut down. But I think both sides though come back to just wanting to be understood, right? I think like.
Or I also think it's the fear of rejection, right? Like it's
fear of rejection and then wanting to make sure the other person understands you. Like you're saying like, oh, you didn't understand me. Let me say more. And I'm saying, no, I understood you. And I said more. And then you completely ignored it. Like we both just feel misunderstood as fuck. And we've had these conversations where we probably both have good intentions. And now we're both elevated as fuck because it's like, you're like, you don't get it. And I'm like, you're not listening to me. And I'm like, you're having a conversation about yourself.
Like, then like understand me, acknowledge mine before you offer yours. And you're like,
bitch, I understood.
I understood.
The first time.
Why do we need to go back? Because you don't understand that I understand? Like, what the fuck? Like, so yeah, it gets a little...
It can get a little muddy.
Little cyclical and like in those moments. And it is. I think it's a flaw. And I think it's toxic. Okay, so now I would just want to ask you directly. In these moments, you know who I am as a person.
Yep.
And then now let's add this level of conversation. I go into these spaces. Does it ever come off as like dismissive or I don't really give a fuck about your point of view? Or can you tell that I'm just very passionate and lost in the sauce, if you will?
I think for me, it doesn't come across that you don't care. I think that goes into the part of me that knows you, that knows that you do care what I think and you do care about my perspective. But I also know that you're someone that overthinks. Said lovingly, that you've probably thought a lot about whatever you're going to say and you just you're ready to go. You've been thinking about this for days and you have the script. You've got your end of the script. You've fucking talked it out with ChatGPT. It's probably in your notes somewhere and there's like 6 other things. And so you've been like rehearsing this to some degree. And then when I show up and I'm offering something that wasn't on your script, I think that's...
change that track.
Yeah. And so it's not that I think you don't care. I think it can come across as dismissive at times if you were too like focused. And that's usually when I try and redirect and be like, hey, like this isn't working. Like this conversation's not working. But I think but I also know that context, that it's coming from a place of you've thought about this a lot and you care, but that doesn't mean that it's okay it means
totally.
It still means that I say something like, I'm like, hey, I hear you, but like allow me to have my own version of this conversation that you weren't anticipating. Yeah.
And I think it's very important for me to kind of chime in on this. It is not your responsibility to do so. However, with somebody that you care about and you have a really established relationship like ours, I would love and appreciate if you stopped me in that moment or let me talk and then say, hey, this is one of those moments and you do this. You were just on your train track. You're not really hearing my perspective at all. And I would love to take 5 minutes to just reset. Let's kind of cool down, maybe get a drink. Press Juicery, we need a sponsor. And
pick one, bitch. Do you want Fever Tree or do you want Press Juice?
Is the NFL got a lot of sponsors?
We are not the NFL
yet.
And also, you got 2. And what do I have? It's my turn.
It's not my fault that you haven't brought your own sponsorship to the table. Let's talk some business. Anyways, so
what do I want?
I would love for you to just. I'm the kind of person, we've talked about this before too. Very direct communication in the moment of when it happens is how I learn. It's how I feel the best. But I also, again, want to stress that is not your responsibility. It isn't. It's mine to learn that. But it is effective, though. It is effective.
It can be effective, but I just want to, like, so it's easy for us in these moments. I'm not saying what we're pushing as far as, like, how you have these conversations isn't legit. It is. But also, like, real life is complicated.
Of course.
And not everyone can just be, like, calmly take that message, right?
I can.
In fact, you haven't always calmly taken that message.
Hey, wait a minute. We got on me enough.
Okay, but I just mean, we're talking about, okay, but I have not also calmly taken that message, to be fair. And so, trying to balance things out. And so, that it's also okay if you say that, you're like, hey, we're not on the same page right now, like the person might not react positively to that and they might not see it in that moment, right? Like, John, I feel like this isn't something you realized the first time it happened. You're becoming very self-aware of this because of like a bit of pattern. And also I think I'll take a little credit, like helping you recognize this pattern. But if this is someone listening and they're talking to someone who hasn't recognized this pattern in themselves, it might not happen right away. Yeah, pattern recognition might not be immediate.
Fortunately and unfortunately, I'm somebody who is always looking inward every minute of every day. And again, I state fortunately and unfortunately, because you can do too much of that. Sometimes just exist. It's okay. You don't have to always be getting better. Like, it's okay to just be this version for a bit, right? Yeah. And yes, this took a minute for me to recognize, and you absolutely played a part in it, right? Like, I don't remember what the conversation was. You were very wrong. And I was, right. No, I don't remember what the conversation was, but you did say like, John, I don't misunderstand. I just disagree. And that was impact. These things impact me in certain ways, you know.
But you had to be in the right headspace.
Same with Flo. When Flo, my friend Flo Master, said to me one time, I was like, yo, this is the dopest shit ever because of this, this, and this. And he was like, that's what you think is dope. And I was like, oh shit. People can have their own perspective of what they think is. It took me like 38 years to have that epiphany. It's like, duh.
So there is an element of like having patience with people in your life. Like,
for sure.
The first time you bring up this message, and this could be with anything, any sort of feedback you're getting. Like, I'm guilty of this too. It's like you get feedback and you're like, that can't be me. Because you have a version of yourself and you're like, that's not how I know myself. That's not who I am. And that's not my intention.
Wear this kind of hat?
Yeah, I'm not Smokey the Bear. Like, it's just like, it's like, so there's that first time, and then the second time you hear it, or there's the third time you hear it from someone else, or you bring it up to your friend, and they're like, oh yeah, sometimes you can do that. Like, it is a journey, and so there is a level of, like, patience, I think, on the other side of, and again, that's with any journey of, these lessons are not learned overnight and they're not recognized overnight, and we all have them. And so approaching it on the other side with a lot of like grace and patience, and unless it's like, of course, like someone's being like literally just like derogatory and like verbally abusive and like absolutely like shutting you down in every way, like that's a completely different thing. That's not okay. Don't put up with that shit. But if this is just someone's like pattern of like getting, like communicating, and you're trying to like help them recognize it, patience.
Well, I want to say something about that right there, right? So, yeah, this takes a high level of EQ. You have to understand that you're trying to grow. And, you know, a lot of people in life have a certain somebody for a certain specific reason, right? And, you know, like maybe you're not necessarily in a relationship with somebody, but they're filling some needs and they're just known as that person for that kind of shit.
We talking about friends with benefits?
We're talking about like a little fuck buddy, but like those kinds of things that exist.
About that.
That exists, right? I also believe that there's real significance in having somebody in your life that helps you see yourself in ways that maybe you don't, right? And for example, I feel ridiculously safe with you in this realm where I come to you and be like, am I like super dismissive when I say this shit? And you're like, bitch, are you dismissive? Like, I don't take that in a weird way because I know you. I know your heart. I know our relationship. I know how we are and who we are and EQ and all the things involved, right? So I would remind people that it's important to, while you have your friends with benefits, maybe you find like an EQ person that also helps you develop yourself, that you feel safe enough to ask questions about yourself. Yeah. Because you don't randomly go around seeing these things about yourself unless somebody calls it out. You don't know that, you don't know that this big ass hat, like, I just keep coming back to this hat. For the record, this hat is hot. I love this hat. It's so fucking fire.
He told me to wear it.
This shit is so fire. And that picture of you in this hat,
yeah, it's literally the words matter picture
like
of me.
Hot. But like,
it's just like the more toned down version.
Can't not give you shade. So like, it's fucking, we have to talk about
I've got plenty of shade under this. Okay. So yeah.
Speaking of, welcome to what it's like to be around you. That being said, let's talk about key takeaways. Maybe we get into the part of like what we can take away from this episode in the conversation.
Yeah. I think, you know, something to be aware of, I guess, if you're having these conversations and you're worried this may be you, you're like, is this me? Like, I can't really tell. Like, I think a couple signs of that.
So from my side.
Yeah, from your side would be like you find yourself like rephrasing or repeating the same point over and over again.
Belaboring the point.
And then, but not like clarifying. You know what I mean? Because there is sometimes people don't understand you, right?
Totally.
And it's like you just repeating yourself in the same way over and over again is actually not effective, whether they understand you or not.
You're just saying, hey, what do you mean? Hey.
Yeah, and they're like,
well, what do you mean? Hey.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And so if you find yourself, you're like, I'm getting frustrated because I keep repeating myself. It's like, well, stop. And then second, maybe ask a clarifying question. Like, does this make, like, even just simple, like, does that make sense to you? Or like, do you have any questions about what I think? Like, it can be that simple. Like, it doesn't have to like be complicated. I think the other sign of that to be aware of is when disagreement or feels like a threat, right? And so it's like a threat for that like disconnection. You're scared about being disconnected from them, or that they're like now upset with you.
Ooh.
Or
okay, that takes a high level of EQ to feel this.
It does, and so this is, you know,
this one's a top tier takeaway for
next
sure.
level. Yeah, exactly. But try, but if you're starting to like feel more like that rejection feeling, again, we've said this a lot, but like tapping into instead, like, am I like feeling rejection, or should I like be leading with curiosity and wonder like what their response is about and get more information?
Or leading with vulnerability and simply just saying, I'm feeling very rejected right now. Is that where you are?
Yeah.
Just say it.
Could be a story you're telling yourself.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Exactly. So, and then I think like the final piece of this is just like if you feel like you're or trying to remind yourself of the end goal. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with this conversation? Like, are you trying to convince someone of something? Are you trying to share perspectives? Are you trying to understand the other person better? Like, if you feel like you're just trying to convince someone, like, maybe it's time to take a step back because, again, that conversation may have already ended on their side and you're just continuing to go. And so what is the end goal of this conversation? What are you trying to accomplish? And are you both on the same page about that?
And what about from the other side? Because you just gave sides from my side of like, I am wondering if I am,
starting to fall into this like
this pattern and everything. What about on your side? Are there some things that you can do, and you being somebody that I feel safe to hear things from, right? Because that's a very important distinction.
Yeah. I think there's a balance of sometimes letting that person just talk it out.
I agree entirely.
Because if you just cut someone off immediately, like, do you feel good when people cut you off? Well,
that's gonna heighten that rejection.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that rejection, misunderstood
You're
feeling.
You're gonna feel it then, whether your EQ's high or not.
There is an element of like, okay, say what you need to say, and then maybe say it one more time, and then it may be the stepping in part. But I think having like a level of like patience. Because sometimes you do just need to get it out of your system. And so that would be one part of it. I think also there's like different strategies. There's like in the moment communication to say like, hey, you're off. Like you're on the train track. I'm going off a little bit and you're not letting this just like naturally progress. And that feels like difficult for me to navigate this conversation. I think there's value in that because it allows you and the other person to, in the moment, identify what's happening. I think if this is becoming more of a pattern, though, it's worth also having conversations that aren't in the middle of the moment.
I agree with that.
Because that can, in the moment, can feel pretty, that's where the rejection.
Guarded.
And being like, oh, like those feelings of like, well, that's not me. Like, that would never be me. I would never try and do that. But it's like, well, if you've had actually time to reflect and you're outside of a situation, you're like, hey, I noticed. Or we just happen
to be drinking some coffee at Starbucks and we're just chilling.
Yeah.
And then you bring this topic up. Now it's a different conversation.
And again, with curiosity or just like kindness, just being like, hey, I've noticed that when we are having like certain conversations that you've had a lot of time to think about and you really prepare for, that it feels like if I'm not following the script that you've thought about, we can't connect and the conversation doesn't flow as naturally. And like, what do you think about that? Have you thought about that at all? Or like, does that resonate with you at all? Have you experienced any of that? Like asking questions, because then I'm not accusing you. I'm not saying you don't let me say what I need to say. You don't like accusing.
That part is so significant.
And I think I'll point out,
tone.
and again, not that I feel this often, but I am just thinking this could happen, that you may legitimately feel that way. You may be frustrated and you may be legitimately upset. And like, that's okay if you want to, if that's how you're actually feeling. It just might not be effective when it comes to communicating, right?
In that, specifically in that moment and in that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
sure.
I don't want to discount that, like, the same way I don't want to discount that rejection's a real feeling and an okay feeling to have as a result of this. Like, so is like frustration and annoyance potentially, but leading the conversation with that doesn't get you very far.
I'd like to add one to your side, if I may. As the person who's on my side, I know what would make me feel better.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing that you said was just kind of letting them speak. It's really good, for sure, in that moment. For me, speaking for me directly, right? And like, the piece I want to add is like using that relational intelligence. Understanding this person, understanding, like, you know me well. And you know that I have to talk to process at times. And you also know that I'm passionate about fucking everything. So like, I may be super passionate. You know that in that moment, I ain't gonna hear you. But you can utilize your relational intelligence to pick that moment to jump in. And really be like, hey, we need to take a second. Or like, you know that like just using some body language can be like, that's gonna adjust how I'm saying things because I see that.
It's usually my face, but
that's not even a decision. That's just she has
that's
no
not
control.
Strategic. Yeah,
she has no control over that in any way.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, from your perspective as someone who's been working on this, like, how would you articulate or like have a conversation with someone about this? How would you initiate that?
Yeah, I think the things that I've learned that's working in my journey, when I catch myself feeling like this, you know.
So you've had the signs of recognizing that you're doing it.
For sure.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely.
In those moments.
Yeah, I've definitely done that. And I try to say things like, I can see where you're coming from. I can see where you're coming from. Or that's a valid point. Or, yeah, that tracks. Or that makes sense. Or, yeah, that's accurate. That's fair. Like those, I try to make sure when they make a point, I'm listening to their side, and I want them to know that I'm listening.
Yeah.
And so if they make a good point, so seldom do we tell people, yeah, that's a good point. That feels good to hear. That's a validation. Validation's a massive part of communication, right? And we all have this sense of rejection, and the opposition of rejection is validation. If you validate what you just said, that makes people feel so much better, right?
Yeah.
I guess maybe the opposition may be acceptance as well, but depends on the topic or how we're approaching things. But there's that, or I've also said to myself, hey, I feel myself trying to convince you, and that's not what I'm trying to do.
That would be nice to hear.
Yeah, I'm really not trying to convince you. I'm very passionate about this, and I'm not exactly sure why I've elevated, but like, let me bring it back down. I'm not trying to convince you, but I am trying to make sure that you understand kind of my position and where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And my hope when I say that is that the response is something to the extent of, yeah, totally. I want to make sure that you know that I understand.
Yeah.
But I also want space to disagree or you know, whatever it is. And and I think the overall
or take
takeaway,
this conversation in a different or a direction that makes sense to
or just
me. Or
add from my vantage. I'm allowed to have perspective, and it can vary from yours.
Yeah. Shocking.
What a fucking okay. So accepting that is a component of this, and then. You know, the biggest thing that I try to take away from this conversation for myself is disagreement is not bad. Disagreement doesn't mean I am going to lose my friend. Disagreement doesn't mean that because we disagree, she's no longer going to talk about certain topics, or because we don't see eye to eye, this, and that. In fact, I quite enjoy having conversations with disagreement because it offers different perspective. We can get to deeper conversation rather than everybody just agreeing.
Well, I think I'm actually I'm less likely to want to have a conversation if I feel like I'm never heard, right?
100%.
Right? It's like I'd rather have a conversation where we're disagreeing, like respectfully instead of
with space to disagree.
Yes, with space to it versus just like trying to be convinced,
which is
one-sided.
100%. Which is the last point that I was going to make is disagreement is an opportunity. It really is. disagreement in this sense is not negative in any way. It's only positive, especially if it's with somebody you care about and somebody you respect and somebody you want to hear their vantage and their perspective. Disagreement is a great thing.
It can bring you closer to other people in your life for sure.
And
that doesn't mean it's comfortable, though. I will say that.
I agree entirely.
We're saying like it's all positive, which I agree, but it doesn't mean all positive equals fully comfortable, because disagreement can feel.
Yeah, in my opinion, I don't see comfort as positive or negative. It's just an emotion, and it's just an emotion. There's no. That's a whole different episode, because I like discomfort. You should be comfortable with discomfort.
But it's more just that, like, I just want to be realistic, though, that like these disagreements are positive because they bring you closer to other people in your life, and you better understand someone and all that.
Opportunity,
but that doesn't mean that in the moment you're winning. Like, you're only winning if you feel good the entire time.
100%.
Disagreement is sometimes to varying degrees, and depending on who you are. I'm someone who's very conflict averse. Like, that it doesn't feel comfortable to me, but I will say at the end, I do feel closer and more connected to someone if we have like similar goals of just understanding each other more.
For sure.
And so when we say it's positive, that's what we mean. It doesn't mean that you're not uncomfortable. It just means that the outcome brings you closer and like makes you feel more connected.
And when I say disagreement is an opportunity for what? So many different things. Becoming closer, seeing a different point of view, seeing a different perspective, offering more credibility to your own point of view. You don't know. It may end up where they see your side way more than you see their side. Like, disagreement it happens all the time. All right, so let's end the episode with this. I actually wrote something specific for the first time that I want to read verbatim because I think it's pretty impactful.
Diary entry 101. Let's go.
101? This isn't a course.
It's your 100.
Diary entry 1.
Oh, this is your first one.
Clearly.
Okay,
Here we go.
Let's hear it.
For the show, at least. Okay. I'm learning that disagreement isn't a wall, it's a bridge if we're willing to cross it. And maybe understanding doesn't mean agreeing. It means being willing to sit with our differences and still connect. And I think that sums it up perfectly for me. What you clapping for?
That was the end of the episode.
Oh, okay. Girl, bye.